Hello! So it looks like I'm doing another vlog. Usually in the past when I've done vlogs on this channel, it's either been to give you an announcement or to update you on what I'm doing at the moment. This time though, I figured I'd just talk about something that interests me, and if you've seen the title of this video, then you probably guessed that that thing is superhero movies. In particular, superhero movies made by Marvel and DC. If you didn't know already, one of the things I love most in this world is superhero movies. In fact, I love them so much that I even made my own once. Watch that. Here. It's very good. It's fun to make. Should really give it a watch if you have a moment. Alright, enough of the self-promotion, let's get on with the video. So, as both Batman vs Superman Dawn of Justice and Captain America Civil War are coming out pretty soon, I figured I'd just talk about Marvel and DC together and just let you know what I think about each of the franchises. Now, a quick disclaimer before I start. At the time of filming this, Batman vs Superman Dawn of Justice is not out yet, so obviously I haven't seen that film. Obviously that means I haven't seen Civil War either because that comes out after. I don't know when this video is going to be released. I'm hoping that it'll be out around the same time as Batman vs Superman, but obviously because I'm filming it in advance, I haven't had a chance to see the movie yet. Some of the stuff that I talk about in this video might not make any sense, might not be relevant to the film if you have seen it, and obviously I'm not going to be able to give you any spoilers in this video because I haven't seen either of the two films. Additionally, I'm only really going to be talking about the cinematic franchises here. The comics are great, but in this short little video, I don't really have the time or, in fact, the knowledge to really go into them in any great detail. So I'm mainly looking at this from a filmmaker's point of view. Finally, and this is a really, really important one, I cannot stress that enough, this is just my opinion. Okay? You may not agree with me and what I say in this video, and that's absolutely fine, okay? What I say in this video isn't the final word on the subject. At the end of the day, I'm just a guy on the internet who makes videos. So if I say something that you don't like, that shouldn't really change your opinion in the franchise. You are free to think what you like, and you are free to disagree with me. You are also allowed to agree with me as well, that's, you know. Okay, so let's kick off with DC Comics. Now, in my opinion, out of Marvel and DC, DC is the weaker of the two franchises. That said, I really like Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. I thought that was fantastic, and I actually prefer those films over a lot of the other Marvel films. Man of Steel was also pretty good, maybe not as good as the Dark Knight trilogy, but really when it comes to Batman vs Superman, I've kind of lost all interest in the DC universe. To me, Batman vs Superman, or certainly what I've seen from the trailers, just seems very cluunky. I'm also not a huge fan of the fact that they're introducing a new Batman so soon after the previous trilogy, especially when that trilogy was so good. And by the way, before all the DC fans jump on me, yes, I know Marvel reboots Spider-Man all the time, giving us origin story after origin story after origin story. Don't worry, I'm going to get to that in a bit. To me, Man of Steel felt like it was set in the same universe as Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. But I guess now that they're introducing Ben Affleck as a new Batman in Dawn of Justice, that isn't the case. And while we're talking about DC, I'm not really that fussed about Suicide Squad if I'm honest either. Now, from what I've seen, and remember I'm just going off the trailers here, both Batman vs Superman and Suicide Squad seem very cartoony in their style. They're definitely still going for the whole dark, gritty style, but there's something about it now that just feels a little bit more cartoony. I can't quite put my finger on it, but it just doesn't feel quite as real as the Dark Knight trilogy, or even Man of Steel. In fact, despite going down this darker route, they seem to be more cartoony than even the Marvel films, which, let's face it, are made by Disney, who are the king of cartoons. The other main problem that I have with DC at the moment as well is they seem to be overloading us with characters very quickly. Batman vs Superman introduces not only a brand new Batman, but also Wonder Woman at the same time. I know this is all part of their plan to get us into the Justice League, but I'm kind of worried that they're going to introduce these characters so quickly that they're not really going to get a chance to shine themselves. And then on top of that, we have Suicide Squad, which is going to introduce a whole load of villains to the DC universe. To me, the whole thing feels very much like a stepping stone just so we can get to the Justice League as quickly as possible. Warner Brothers and DC have seen how well Marvel and Disney have done with the Avengers, and they're thinking, yeah, we want to do that as well. And I'm not saying they shouldn't. After all, they're a movie studio and they need to go where they're going to make the money. But I'm just a little bit worried that they're rushing into the whole thing. In fact, this is the main reason that I prefer Marvel over DC. At the moment. They've spent such a long time building a really solid foundation for their universe, which I think is fantastic. For each of their major heroes, they put out at least one standalone film before they even thought about making an Avengers film. They didn't rush into making the Avengers, they built up to it slowly over time, and by building that sense of anticipation, when the Avengers finally did come together, it felt like a real event. The Dark Knight trilogy being followed immediately by Man of Steel, which then ties into Batman vs Superman, which is then also followed by a Suicide Squad, just feels very messy in comparison to Marvel's controlled build-up. And again, I'm not against the DC films, they just haven't captured my attention in recent years in the same way that Marvel have. In my opinion, it feels like Marvel have been playing the long game. They set out a plan years and years ago and they're pretty much sticking to it. DC and Warner Brothers seem to be reacting to the success that Marvel have had, introducing their big characters as soon as possible so they can get to the Justice League movie and make the big bucks. As I say, that might be completely wrong, but that's just how I read it from an outside point of view. Another one of the reasons that I really like Marvel at the moment is that they don't take themselves too seriously. After all, they're owned by Disney, so they need to be kind of family friendly. But the whole thing feels very accessible, and they poke fun at themselves quite regularly. They know this whole superhero thing is kind of ridiculous. In fact, there was a great moment in, I think, the Ant-Man trailer, where Hank Pym says to Scott, "I want you to become the Ant-Man," and Scott replies by saying, "Great, I'll do it. Can we change the name, though?" Yes, Ant-Man is a bit of a ridiculous name, and Marvel know it, so they make a joke about it. I don't feel like you get something like that in the DC movies. One of the other great successes I think they've had is that all their films seem to stand alone pretty well on their own. Yes, there's a huge backstory that is there if you want to go back and look at all the other films, but each film stands alone on its own merit as being a good film. There's always those little moments where they try to tie things in. They always keep referencing what happened in New York, for example, which could be kind of confusing if you've not seen the first Avengers film. But to me, it doesn't feel like you'd be totally confused if you dropped in on a film just right in the middle of the series. Again, Ant-Man is a really good example of this. It's a new hero with a new start, and yes, it does tie into the Avengers a little bit, but it's not so much that it overpowers the entire story and would leave any new viewers feeling completely overwhelmed and unable to understand what's going on. However, things are starting to get a bit complicated now that the universe is constantly expanding and getting bigger with every single movie they make. The more characters that they introduce, the harder it gets to contain them all in a film while giving them adequate screen time and story and plot. I think the latest Avengers suffered from this a bit, and there's a good chance that the same will happen again in Civil War. Additionally, Guardians of the Galaxy, which is a great standalone film, hasn't really crossed over into the rest of the cinematic universe. Although there are a few things with the Infinity Stones and stuff like that, we haven't actually seen the characters cross over properly yet. In fact, and I'm going to give a little bit of a spoiler here for Age of Ultron, so if you haven't seen that, what have you been doing? It's been out a year already. But at the end of that movie, I really thought they were setting up the Hulk to end up in outer space so that he would end up coming across the Guardians of the Galaxy in their next movie. But apparently he's actually going to be making an appearance in the new Thor film. They're not two characters that I would necessarily put together, and it could be quite interesting. But I really do think they missed a huge opportunity here to introduce the Guardians of the Galaxy into the main story. I'm also not really a huge fan of Spider-Man making an appearance in Civil War. Just like I wasn't that keen on DC introducing a new Batman this soon, I think it could be a similar misstep for Marvel to reboot Spider-Man again so quickly. Spider-Man is a huge character for Marvel, and it's great to see that he's back with Marvel, don't get me wrong on that. But I get the impression that Civil War is mainly going to be about the battle between Captain America and Iron Man. My worry is that Spider-Man is going to be introduced in such a small role that he's actually not going to be all that important. Given that you have most of the Avengers in this film already, plus then you introduce a new Spider-Man to the mix, it feels like he isn't going to necessarily get the attention he deserves. To me, it feels like Marvel made a deal with Fox to get the rights back to Spider-Man and wanted to put them into effect as of immediately because it's such a huge thing for them. It feels quite rushed, which is pretty uncommon for Marvel, and I just don't want to see them mess up one of their biggest characters. I think we could have waited till a bit further down the line to introduce Spider-Man, given especially that we don't seem to be getting any new Iron Man films, and given that we're also kind of running into the B stock of characters for Marvel. It could be a really good move for them to save one of their biggest characters until the end. Additionally, and I know this is going to be an unpopular opinion, but I'm not a huge fan of Spider-Man being a teenager. I know that's how it is in the comics, but I'm just not entirely convinced it's going to work on screen. We'll see how it plays out, but that's just my opinion. So it's not all good for Marvel. They do have the potential to make some really big mistakes here. That said, they've had a really great start to creating their cinematic universe, and so far it's all gone well for them. It's a huge achievement, and I can't applaud them enough for that, so well done, Marvel. But as I said, as the universe keeps expanding, there's more potential for them to mess things up. And of course, as the universe gets bigger and bigger, those missteps will have more effect. DC may surprise me with Batman vs Superman, but to be quite honest, after the huge amount of build-up with the promotion they've had, I've just kind of lost interest in it, really. I think this quite neatly sums up my opinion on the two franchises. When Civil War is released, I'm excited for that film and I will go and see it on the day it comes out, probably. Batman vs Superman, I'll go and see it, but whenever I get a chance, really. I'm not going to be changing my plans for it. I'm sure both films and both franchises will be a commercial success. People are going absolutely nuts for superhero movies at the moment, and as long as people go and see both of these movies, the studios are going to make money, which at the end of the day is what it's all about. But yeah, in conclusion, really excited about Marvel. Less so with DC, in my opinion. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, then please do consider subscribing to my channel and, you know, maybe go and check out that superhero movie I mentioned earlier. Go and have a look. I'm also on Twitter and Facebook, so if you want to follow me on each of those, there are links in the description, and you can let me know what your thoughts on DC and Marvel are. I'm hopefully going to be releasing new videos quite regularly from now on, but for the moment, that's all for now. Bye.
Listen to me.
What?
That device they gave you,
What about it?
it's a bomb. They want to get rid of your powers. The easiest way to do that is to get rid of you.
It's not a bomb. How do you know? It's a bit small, isn't it?
There isn't much time.
See? Nothing to worry about.